to this parallel session for this afternoon. We've got 3 presentations. Each presenter will present for 20 minutes and there'll be a 10-minute window in which we can ask questions after that. So I'm going to kick off and get us started straight away because we've got quite a packed agenda. So Tom, over to you for the first presentation.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can successfully share my slides again. There we go, great. My name's Tom Staunton. I work at the University of Derby for something called ICEGS, which is the International Centre for Guidance Studies, which basically means that I'm interested in career and career development and career interventions. I have a particular interest about how career works in a higher education context, particularly related to digital technology. What I'm going to be talking about this afternoon is some findings from my PhD, which I'm hopefully in the last stages of. So I'm particularly looking in my PhD at how recent university graduates experience using digital platforms like social media, like LinkedIn, Twitter, other similar platforms as part of their career transitions. In summary, if I could get the slides to move on, there we go. What I'm going to be discussing is sort of a response to some of what I see as the dominant sort of themes in the literature, which tend to look at a link between employability and digital literacy. The big idea is that if you become more digitally literate, you're able to use digital platforms in various ways to support your employability. And I'm going to, in my study, I've tried to respond to this critically through an empirical study. And my main argument is that overly focuses on digital platforms as sites that individuals can use without any sort of significant problems. It particularly looks at digital sites mainly as tools and doesn't recognize sort of the socioeconomic structures that exist in those sites. So I'm going to give you a bit of an insight to some of the data from my study, and then particularly take you through a few themes which have come out of my study, looking at how I found that students and graduates' experiences of using digital technology were firstly inducted, secondly fetishized, and thirdly surveilled. So yeah, that's hopefully what I'm going to have a go at accomplishing in slightly less than 20 minutes now. So digital literacy, this is one of the main concepts which I've been trying to engage with through my study. It's sort of particularly developed by authors such as Douglas Belshaw over sort of 10 years or so ago now, and many others since. And it's particularly supported by sort of wider organizations such as JISC, do lots of work in this area. Digital literacy as a concept, as I'm sure many of you be aware, tries to conceptualize a key set of capacities that an individual needs in order to make use of digital platforms. This has heavily been sort of applied into areas such as social media, looking at the underpinning ideas that a student would need in order to make good use of digital literacy, good use of digital platforms for their academic study, for their sort of their general ability to engage with university life, and in terms of their employability and their transition to work after finishing their time of their degrees. In my area, which is particularly concerned with career development, it's been picked up and sort of repackaged as a sort of an allied concept called digital career literacy, particularly authors such as Tristram Hooley, again writing about 10 or so years ago, and then others such as Ruth Bridgestock making similar sorts of claims around taking this idea of literacy, of sort of underpinning skills and abilities that anybody would need to engage with digital platforms as things which we can also conceptualize as the underpinning skills that an individual would need to make use of digital platforms for their careers. I really sort of see this as like as a very much an instrumental view of how to make use of technology. Sort of this idea that this simple metaphor that you can pick up and use a site like Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever else the individual is using, and if you have the right understandings and the right abilities, you're able to use this effectively to support your career transition. Sort of the digital platform in that view becomes an instrument that the individual can make use of. In my work, I've been particularly influenced by some more sort of critical perspectives, which focus less on literacy and more on sort of description of a digital platform. So people like Nick Cernacek and Ulysses Mahias, in particular, also very much influenced by the work of Van Dyke, sort of draw attention that platforms aren't just sites that individual can use as instruments, but that they are fundamentally economic models which are designed in various ways to function as an economic entity. Cernacek, particularly through his sort of conception of platform capitalism, draws attention to the way that digital sites sort of control and structure participation, ultimately so those sites can extract meaningful profit through the way that they make use of users' data. This really draws attention to the way that digital sites, they enable various forms of agency and various forms of participation, are actually ultimately structured by somebody who's designed them for a particular set of purposes. So it's not sort of it's not descending into sort of a bland sort of determinism where sort of technology takes over, but rather seeing that participation and agency is situated on a site which exists for a different set of purposes. My study, I've been exploring how graduates use social media sites, and I did this through a longitudinal study over a 2-year period, where I started interviewing students during the final year of their degree, and then checked in on them twice over sort of a 2-year period to see how their understanding of social media and their experiences of using social media for their career development changed and developed over that time period. So yeah, it was initially with 24 participants. There was a bit of a drop off through the study, as you can imagine. But yeah, I very much took that longitudinal design to see how their experiences and their feelings changed over time. I could talk about my methods in a bit more detail if anyone wants to pick me up on it afterwards. But yeah, I use a combination of IPA and some sort of narrative analysis as well. So what did I find out? I want to particularly focus on 3 main themes that came through from my study, because I think they sort of they speak to some of the limitations of sort of conceptualizing the link between career and digital platforms as one based around literacy. And yeah, I flagged those up at the beginning. So the first of those is sort of this idea of induction. I found that students fundamentally started using digital platforms because they were told to by the university that they attended, particularly in relation to their careers. Unsurprisingly, students were often using social media sites for various parts of their social lives, but the idea that they might use it for their career very much came from the university, particularly from lectures, but from other academic staff as well. So rather than being like a sort of a natural expression of their generational status, as some people in the literature argue, or just students learning a set of skills which allow them to do something, that the idea that they would use digital platforms very much came from their university. Yeah, people often were told to through induction talks, or had assignments that required them to make use of digital platforms. So it's very much an experience that they had on university that led to them using social media sites for their careers in the first place. I'm going to just sprinkle in a few quotes as I work through this. So one of my participants said this, and let me just read it out to make it easier. So they said, we kept being told of all of these amazing stories of people who actually got amazing jobs on LinkedIn. And I just kept thinking, how is that? Why is that? Why have I not actually spoken to anybody who's ever done this? So this was from a later interview. This was from a stage 3 interview, somebody reflecting on this real strong messaging that they'd received from the academics on their course, being told fairly consistently, you need to be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's really great for finding jobs. Be on LinkedIn. It's almost by being on LinkedIn itself would you be approached by an organization, be hired. This sort of story of the power of social media sites really permeated these accounts of the rationale for why students needed to start using digital platforms for their careers. And I obviously talked to people who were using digital sites, so I guess this could be overstated for my sample, but the vast majority of people in my sample had these very strong experiences of being told by academics on their courses that they should use digital platforms for their careers. And predominantly amongst this was the idea that they should be using LinkedIn. And on the whole, students took this on. Very few of them had started using a digital platform for their careers before they came to university. It was an idea that they were very much inducted into by their time on their program. But yeah, I want to as you can see in this quote, there's also a bit of a tension from the student who's sort of slightly reflecting. Well, I was told to do this. I was told it'd be really useful. I was told all these amazing stories, but it doesn't really match with sort of my experience, which was a theme for definitely a segment of my participants, that talking to them 18 months, 2 years after graduating, a good number of them had found that social media sites were a lot less useful than they'd been told to. One of the ways that I analyze this is sort of drawing on some wider ideas from sociology and anthropology around fetishism. I've got a picture of a Buddhist prayer wheel, which comes up in some of Kaplan and Quarol's work around fetishism. They have this idea of symbolic substitution, which they really use to describe fetishism. They see it as a process by which there's a symbolic substitution where somebody puts a technology in the place of their own activity in the world and puts confidence that a technology can symbolically accomplish something for them. As in the case of a prayer wheel, rather than the individual praying all these prayers in sort of the Buddhist tradition that they'd be part of, the prayer wheel itself is spun in order to pray for them. Kaplan and Quarol use this as a metaphor for the way that people's confidence and belief in technology can lead them to engaging in technology in a way where they think they're being active, but actually, in many ways, it's making them less passive and less engaged with the world. And they use this as a metaphor for what happens through how often we engage with digital platforms. So this idea of symbolic substitution comes up from Kaplan and de Quarol. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I found it really sort of resonated with a lot of my participants that often looked at digital platforms as inherently social and inherently powerful. There was almost a sense that they were becoming more social by being on them. They were becoming more connected by being on them, that they were becoming nearer to a graduate role. They were expressing their agency and moving towards a career they wanted to have merely by being on the platform itself. And I think there was a sense in which the digital platform was becoming a substitute for them. They were symbolically seeing that they were becoming social, when in many ways they were just very focused on gaining more and more connections, which weren't necessarily relating to the development of social capital in the real world, or in the offline world, I guess, if we're being a bit more precise. So I just want to give you a bit of a quote which sort of talks through this. Again, one of my participants talking again about this process of being at university says, well, throughout university there was a lot of talk on about LinkedIn and how useful it is and how we need to be quite interactive on it and keep the engagement going. So I did all of that in a way. I was expecting more from it, but I was pretty sure that keeping it up and keeping everything going on LinkedIn is going to have some form of positive impact, even though I wouldn't necessarily know in what reference. So they had this real sense that by engaging with LinkedIn, by putting all of this effort into maintaining their profile, keeping it up to date, posting stories onto the site, sending messages out, connecting with people, that by keeping the engagement going, that they would have a positive impact on their career. But this individual found that transition was very difficult for them, and in many ways on reflection ended up saying, well, I can't really see how LinkedIn has actually helped me at all. I'm not sure what the positive impact is from it. Despite that, they still often sort of talked as if LinkedIn was this social place that they would be able to engage with in the future. I found often as students had a sort of a tension when they talked about social media sites in later stages of the project, where they would say, well, I haven't found it particularly useful. I think it was oversold to us, but fundamentally, I still think that, if you use LinkedIn well, it will give you the relationships that you need and allow you to access the labour market in a way that you wouldn't have done so far. So yeah, social media platforms were surprisingly robust in the minds of students who were finding graduate transitions difficult, and finding that there was little tangible benefit for themselves from social media sites. So that's the sort of idea of fetishism, particularly sort of this symbolic substitution, which I think came through from my study. Lastly, there was there was a quite strong theme around surveillance and how students experience surveillance. It came through quite consistently. Students, I think in sort of the wider popular culture, maybe less so now, but definitely sort of 5 years or so ago, when I was in early stages of my PhD, there was a real sort of sense that students just didn't know about how much could be seen online, that they were sort of immature in their use and sort of exposing themselves to all of these negative consequences through sort of rash posting, and these stories crop up online on a fairly sort of regular basis about individuals who have been caught out in various ways, and that has career consequences because people have gone back and dug up tweets from decades ago and things like that. I found in my study, students were very aware of this, but they saw surveillance as kind of like a double-edged sword. Yes, it created some tensions for them, but they were also wanted to become more visible, and so were prepared to pay the price that surveillance seemed to be requiring of them. Often they did this through trade of recognizing that when they were maybe being less authentic in how they presented themselves through social media, but they saw it instead as they often talked about professionalism as a way of mediating this, that they had a professional, they made professional use of digital sites. They wouldn't become a cropper of some of these stories they were worried about because they were presenting themselves professionally, which often had slightly loose, undefined views, but was definitely an idea that came up quite a lot.
Tom, that's your 3-minute warning.
Amazing, thank you. Despite this, students still sort of experience various forms of harassment, which I think was probably one of the findings that I was less expecting through the study, that some students were harassed quite directly by people who were, and particularly young female students, often had people approaching them on LinkedIn, and it seemed like there was a job offer, and it was probably slightly less straightforward intentions, and students often had to navigate things like pyramid schemes around scam jobs, which or jobs which were very precarious and had very little legal protection. And often students would talk about, well, I would have been more aware of that if it had come across it on Instagram, but because I was on a professional social media site like LinkedIn, I was more trusting. And I was also worried that saying no to somebody might have career consequences. Often their sense of precarity at an early stage of their career left them more open to to some of the negative sides that exist on social media. Let me just click through. There's a just an example of a student being very aware of some of these issues I was just discussing. But yeah, so in conclusion, I was sort of very concerned about, I've sort of developed a view of social media that really wants to think about the process of platformization as central to individuals' career development on these sites. And I would see that platformization as a concept that comes out, that is very prevalent in higher education through a combination the way higher education has become more digitized over the last 20 years, and the way that that government policy has driven an employability agenda that leads to students increasingly on social media both being encouraged to use digital platforms and to develop their careers. And I see there's kind of like a meshing together of those. I would say that this ends up situating students' agency on these sites, that they've found that that digital platforms directed what was or wasn't possible for them. They still exerted their agency, but it was very much situated on the platform itself. But there were further consequences in terms of how individuals' beliefs were influenced, particularly around these ideas of fetishism and the confidence that individuals would put in social media sites, but also in ideas such as professionalism and how they chose to present themselves in a way which they thought would be appealing on digital platforms. despite this, yeah, it sort of exposes them to a series of problems that they had to navigate through in their career, and that they were often not told about in advance. Okay, yeah, if anybody has anything they'd like to follow up on me, obviously very happy to take questions now. But yeah, those are my contact details. You can, yeah, there's my work email address. You can also find me on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it at the moment. Yeah, let me stop sharing slides there, and yeah, very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. So we're over to questions for the audience. I certainly have a number for you, but I don't want to monopolise. So colleagues, have you got any questions for Tom? In that case, I will kick off, Tom. And in terms of the students that were your participants, or the graduates that were your participants, did they come from any particular subject discipline, or any particular university sort of kind of status or anything like that? Regions in the UK or more global?
So I recruited from a single university, partly because I was interested in the interaction between some local university policies and the actual sample itself. But in that context, I was very careful to recruit across a range of different disciplines. It wasn't sort of tied to a particular discipline. I think I did a fairly good job of doing people from arts backgrounds, humanities, social science, IT, natural sciences. I think I didn't particularly pick up on this here, but I think there was, though this idea of platformization affected all of those transitions, probably the sector they were trying to get into actually made a big difference to that on sort of like a secondary level, particularly students trying to get into the creative sector where digital platforms are, and like having to have a digital portfolio, for example, is really required, really shaped some of those experiences. But yeah, it's clear. Try to be broad in the context of a single institution study.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. Sarah's posted in the chat a question. So Sarah, do you want to ask the question, or would you prefer that I read it out for you?
Hi, thank you. That was really interesting. Thanks, Tom. I just wanted to ask, taking into consideration what you found from your research, do you have any proposals or any recommendations for how social media for career development should or should not be advocated with students?
Yeah, I mean, I think partly there's a need for more detail in terms of how students are encouraged to make use of platforms. There was often this confidence given by academics that just by being on the site it's going to have positive impacts, and I think it's more helpful for students to have a clearer view of the sorts of things that would make a difference in their discipline area, and social media might be a part of that. I think some of this advice does tend to be quite industry specific, and recognizing which platforms are important in different industries, and sometimes in industries where the platform isn't that important at all, and students would have done better just knowing that in advance. I think also students, I think there are wider conversations with students about some of the difficulties of using these sites, and the potential for harassment, which they might miss out on, I think is a really important conversation to be having with students. And for some of them, some of them sort of had faced costs around their identity. Students talked about, oh, well, I am quite politically involved, but I really don't want that to be on LinkedIn because I'm worried what an employer might think about that. And I think in terms of I feel in terms of our duty of care for students, being able to talk through some of those issues and about their emerging identities and some of the pressures that social media or digital platforms might put on that, I think are really important conversations to be having.
Yeah, agree. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Otherwise, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Tom. Rosa, you had a question as well.
Yeah, if we still have time.
No, a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Tom, for your presentation.
Yes.
I was really interested in your longitudinal study. I was going to ask about that, but I got more interested into this sort of shift of using platformatization from what I'm guessing your students or the people you interview are in the undergraduate level. Did you feel that through your research you found that there is a shift in the way they use the platforms from something that is more personal, and then they change their personal way of using the platforms because they started use it for professional reasons as well. How did their attitudes toward their platforms change based on your research, basically?
Yeah. Okay. So I found. So I interviewed students in the final year of their degree. I was asking for students saying, "Are you using a social media platform? Would you be happy to talk to me about their experiences?" So they were already quite set up for the idea of using it in some way for their careers. I found longitudinally that changed for two big reasons. One is there was a really pronounced change when students found jobs. Often once they found a job, then they became very, very concerned about how they might be presented online and the precarity of holding on to that job, and so often radically decreased their social media use in the early stages of a graduate career. The other thing was a lot of them did end up using it less and less as time went on, as they found it less useful. I mean, some did find jobs through it, some did find it very positive, particularly in sectors where it was really required of them. But yeah, I think there was a shifting off over time, which I think was interesting. And partly interesting because my study was mainly conducted during 2020 and 2021 during COVID lockdowns, when you might have imagined that a social media platform would be really useful because they're not able to access other networks. But even despite that, in some cases, there was an ongoing reduction as they just found it less and less useful. Anyways.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, and that's been really interesting. I've got loads of questions to ask you because I do teach this kind of thing to the students.
Okay.
And so similar to the question I think that Sarah had asked earlier about, how much of this do we embed in the curriculum, but I'm conscious we've got quite a lot to get through this afternoon. So I'm hoping that you're on at conference in person later in the week, because I'll try and find you to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I'm not. I've got.
All right. In that case, I will pick you up on your email address then.
Yeah, exactly.
To answer those questions. Brilliant.
Yeah,
thanks for posting that in the chat. So I'm going to hand over now to Jodie, who's continuing the employability theme for us this afternoon. So over to you, Jodie, and if you can share your screen, that'd be super.
Thank you, I will do. Here we go. Right, obviously as my presentation starts, the train goes past the office windows. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, so my presentation here is all about a piece of research I've done about professional digital e-portfolios and perceptions of employability, reflective practice, and the development of skills for childhood studies undergraduate students here at the University of Portsmouth. So my sample essentially are childhood studies students, and as I'll go through the presentation and present my findings, what I'll do is make it really clear the difference between the students in the subject area and why some of these things apply to them, because I think that's sometimes contextually very important. So just before we begin this presentation, I asked my students a couple of times before we start the portfolio process, I asked my students to just do one thing in my class. And essentially I get them to get their phones out. And if we were in a room now at a conference, I'd get everybody in this room to do the same thing. And I get them to turn to the person next to them, and I ask them to tell their friend about their favourite app. And what I find in this 1 minute with their partner is that the whole room is absolutely buzzing. So there's lots of conversation, lots of discussion. And essentially the students are choosing their app, Tom, often it's a social media app, and they're explaining why it's their favourite, what they use it for. And there's absolutely no sort of issues with that activity. So then what I do is I ask them to unlock their phones and then hand their phones to their partners to have a look. And just before they do that, I say, no, don't do that. That's not ethical at all. But then we have a conversation about how did that feel? How did it feel to talk about your favourite app, but then turn to your partner, unlock your phone and then give it to them? And some of the feedback that I've been given, and this is very incidental, this isn't part of the research, but they said I felt very vulnerable. My phone is mine, it's my private thing. And one student likened it to Gollum in Lord of the Rings and said, my phone is my precious. And I don't want to give my phone to somebody else in case they see something about my life that I don't want them to see. So what I then do is I take that feeling of vulnerability and ownership, and I think, now how can we use this sense of ownership or vulnerability when we're thinking about curating some sort of digital presence embedded in curriculum in their degree programs? And I talk about this idea of students owning their digital presence as much as they can, but also how they can then harness that vulnerability, and very similar to what Tom said actually, to feel professional. If they're feeling like they're under surveillance, that there is a professional persona online that they're able to fall back on. So I asked the question, how important is a carefully curated online presence for enhancing employability and career prospects? And I'm not coming from sort of the career advisor angle, I'm coming from the senior lecturer angle, because I'm first and foremost teaching them. But this is really part of, our graduate outcomes, and this is really part of what we're trying to do in childhood. Our students come to us because they want to work with children. And employers are very, very quick. I think I've got a statistic up here, about cyber vetting. Employers are very, very quick to look at online profiles if exposing new professionals to children. That's something that we found in our sector, is that, this isn't necessarily linked just to childhood, but in 2020, a study was done that found that over 70% of employers will look at potential employees' online profiles before considering them. And we know, because we work with a lot of local employers, that if a student is going to a placement, if a student is going to go and apply for a job, that their online profiles mean something, because our employers tell us that. They say, if this person is going to be working with children, we'll Google their name before we ask for a reference. So it's something that is quite important, and we try and talk about this idea of ownership when it comes to online profiles, which is kind of where our e-portfolios come in. So just to give you a bit of context, because everything I say about e-portfolios is very contextually bound, and when I do my presentations about this stuff at the moment, a lot of questions say, how would you recommend I tailor this approach to these students and those students? And often the answer is not particularly that straightforward. So just to give you some sort of insight, our students, they are coming to do childhood studies in one capacity or another. So child and youth with criminology, for example, child and youth with psychology, early childhood studies. So they wish to work with children. They don't always know how they want to work with children, but they know that's what they want to do. A huge thing at the moment for our students is play therapy. So students are coming up to do that. It's very much seen, along with nursing, along with social work, as a caring degree programme. Students are looking to give. That makes a difference. And this is probably a very key important part, is that work placements are a compulsory part of the degree programme. So we know that our students are going to have professional experiences when they're studying for their degrees. So these include things like schools, nurseries, youth clubs, outdoor clubs, activity centres. Any opportunity for a student to come into a professional environment with children is offered on the degree programme for them to do as part of their curriculum. So we have placements, they're not optional. So we have that as a bit of a string to our bow with our approach. So e-portfolios for undergraduate childhood studies students essentially look like this. They are made up of personalised Google Sites. At the moment, the platform that we're using is Google Sites, and they have multiple elements, and they sort of serve as an online record of achievement. They're submitted in year 2 for a level 5 assessment, but they're accessible throughout study and beyond. And what we do at level 6, so in year 3, is we take their e-portfolios and we teach students how to tailor them in order to then send them to employers. And what our students typically do is, when they're writing CVs, they'll have a link to their e-portfolio on their CV. Or some students will print off business cards when they go to careers events here at the university. And on their business cards, they'll have a QR code that take employers directly to their e-portfolios. So it's essentially an online CV, but a real record of achievement. And in it, it's got a couple of different things. One thing is micro-credentials. So across any childhood studies degree, students need to get a minimum of 3 micro-credentials to enhance their employability. So these for us include things like paediatric first aid, safeguarding, children's safety online, children's mental health and wellbeing. and they then get put as certificates into their e-portfolio to show that as well as the degree programme that they've done, they've got a micro-credential and professional experience. And there's a screenshot from some of our students' e-portfolios. One student did British Sign Language as her micro-credential, another one has done interpreting, another one has done safeguarding, or they've done some NSPCC training, or like I said, paediatric first aid. The second part of the e-portfolio is reflections on work placements. So focused around 3 areas of focus and professional standards like teacher standards, national youth work standards, early years standards, or social pedagogy standards, depending on where the student has done their placement. They then have a work placement reflection, and that's in the form of 10 workplace logs and then a longer extended critical incident. And I've put a picture there of someone's reflective logs and their standards. They then have to start looking ahead for when they graduate. So they will have an employability reflection that they choose an application for a role or further study. And then they have to go and either see a careers advisor, go to a careers fair, and they have to engage with something that enhances their employability. And then finally, as I referred to earlier, they have to underpin everything they do with some form of professional standard in the childhood sector. So that's essentially what an e-portfolio will look like when it's finished. And the research that I have done has essentially started to look at what the impact of these e-portfolios have been for students. So the first question that I will answer for you is why e-portfolios? And I think Tom's presentation sort of before this has been a really nice sort of lead into some of these reasons. So Tom, thank you. But why e-portfolios? You know, neoliberalism, higher education, marketisation of education, not always the best things to talk about, but UK universities, we compete for students. Employability is a driving force. Students are more aware of value for money, and leaving with micro-credentials and an e-portfolio has often been used in our marketing materials as a product. And regardless of how I feel about that, it's become a really good way to attract students, which is obviously key for higher education institutions. And interestingly enough, brand awareness for students. The e-portfolio has become part of our childhood studies brand. So students come and they do an e-portfolio, but employers in the local area will now see that a student has come through the childhood studies degree programs that we offer, and they'll ask students, can I please see your e-portfolio? So it's this idea of almost branding their experience to say, yeah, this is what I've got. We know as well that any form of reflective dialogue adds significant value to the student experience. There's lots of literature on this. Ring et al. Is definitely a source. I've put it at the end. But we're looking at how students can not see their degree as a fresh start, and this is where we start and this is where we end, but seeing their degree as the next step in their life. So every experience that they've had in the past and every experience that they've had in the future is part of their professional journey. And so this idea of self-reflective dialogue is something that we encourage, definitely in an academic sense, but for them to be continuous reflective practitioners. We know that work experience and degree programmes yield higher academic results. We've also got some internal data at the University of Portsmouth that shows that students that actually take a placement year, either abroad or in the UK, come back and they end up getting a higher classification than what they were on track to get at the end of their second year had they continued. So it's quite an interesting sort of dynamic when we're looking at what work placements can do in terms of shaping the whole individual. And this idea of students' self-concept when it comes to reflecting on issues related to work. And go back to Tom and his curation of social media, this idea of self-concept when it comes to curating things online can come through work experience. Well, what does the employer want? I'm going to go and see it firsthand. And then we come to the use of digital tools, which we're not particularly wedded to Google. I know I've put the Google logo up there, but Google Sites has definitely been the best thing that we can use in our current sort of digital tool offering, because it allows students to be creative and students can access it when they graduate. So their e-portfolio doesn't just become a product of their degree for assessment, it becomes something that they can fall back on. So a digital approach, it showcases digital skills more efficiently, but it allows them to be creative. No two e-portfolios look the same. Even students who choose the similar template and similar colours have two very different approaches. Again, this idea of a depth of information just at the sharing of a link, and those students who put their e-portfolios via QR code are definitely able to share this idea of sort of seamless connection between this is who I am and this is an in-depth look at me. E-portfolios can be used to promote digital identities. And then finally, I know I'm looking at the time, and there's obviously a lot I wanted to say about this study, not just its underlying context, but reflection for us is absolutely key and integral to our curriculum in many different ways. But what we don't want to do, and what the literature is continually pointing towards, is that reflection, if it's separate to our curriculum or it's just a set of exercises, students lose this idea of value if they're not able to reflect on their learning experience and their professionalism and their professional standards and where they want to go. So having the e-portfolios with the reflective element as a really key part of curriculum has been one of the biggest strengths of using e-portfolios. And they're not without their limitations, but essentially this slide here is about why we chose to do them. We've also got this idea as well of if students are able to self-author their reflective accounts, then they end up with a heightened awareness and preparation for professions. And in the findings, I don't think today I'm going to have enough time to go into it, but we had students say things like, I didn't quite realise that working in a nursery would entail what it did. So this idea of being able to reflect and write about things and then curate a digital profile about them has given students a really heightened awareness of this is what an employer expects from me. And then I've been able to reflect on it. But then I'm also able to see things that I would like to change if I was in this industry, if I was in this role. And that's been really powerful. So just to give you a little bit of insight, I interviewed 2 groups. So at the time, this was done in 2021, current students, there were 5 current students and 4 graduates. So the 5 current students had completed their e-portfolio in year 2 and they were now in year 3 and they were converting it for employers. And I interviewed 4 graduates who had finished their e-portfolios and then were now either in the job market or they were doing further study. So they were my sort of research group, and they were a combination between childhood and youth and early childhood studies students. The key themes were employability, reflection, professional identity, digital skills, and there was some sort of miscellaneous findings that sort of linked to the student experience. Essentially, here's some of our key findings. Got 5 minutes left, so hopefully enough time. So linked to professional identity, students said things such as it helps you to reflect and develop you as a professional person. The way you're running as a professional, not a student. I don't feel like a student when I was writing this. Now, that as a key finding was echoed in a few different ways, and it's really changed the perception that we have as lecturers in the childhood studies team. Now, as well as being a lecturer, I'm also the subject area leader for education at the moment at the university. And so providing training for staff and line managing 25 members of staff, these findings have been really key to say to students, when you come to us, you're on a journey, you're on a learning journey, but you're going to be going into professional placements. And actually, we don't see you as students, we see you as professionals. And we want to have professional conversations with you, and we want to understand your stories and your narratives and where you come from in terms of how you can then develop professionally as you move forward through this journey. And some of these findings really, really sort of underpin that idea, is that a student didn't feel like a student when they were writing it, they felt like a professional. And for us, that was a really key part of the assessment, being so integral, but also being more of an assessment. They can take it with them. Another finding about being a professional is that what we cover in class academically, so our theory, was made a little bit more sense now students were able to reflect on things. So then moving forward to employability, we've got another one. I felt like a professional person when I was writing this rather than a student doing a task. And referencing professional standards linked to theory, there's one job, there are 50 applicants. If you use the language from the teacher standards in your application, you're more likely to get through those first few instances because you use those keywords. When we look at professional standards in other modules and other things that we do, what we found in terms of employability is that the teacher standards and the standards that we use were almost abstracts because students weren't seeing how they can apply them to their experiences. So that was a really key thing for us. But of course, these are all very positive findings. We did also have lots of other things. And this is a bit, linked to the other presentation.
Jodie, I'm just going to give you your 3-minute warning, so apologies for interrupting.
No, you're absolutely fine. So the digital skills is, we sort of saw students as being fairly digitally literate, and it was in curating their e-portfolios that actually students really did struggle. So they said it's a really extensive resource, it's really difficult. You wanted it to look good, but it took a lot of time. Other students reported back saying, we've got our LinkedIn profiles, we've got our e-portfolios, then you've got to do job applications. Digital know-how is needed, but there is an awful lot for us to do. We also found that the term digital natives was also sort of massively damaging. So some students were finding that they felt like their generation meant that people assumed that they had a level of digital skill that they didn't. And so that was a really big challenge for e-portfolios, is that they were seen as a really daunting task, because essentially students were building a website. And then finally, just mindful of the time, sort of some stuff about reflection here, that there was this idea of a real vulnerability in reflection. You felt really vulnerable when you submitted those reflections, because how did we know what was real and what wasn't? How did we know if what I was seeing and critiquing was right? And that vulnerability is something that we talk about in class quite a lot, especially if a student is if a student is critiquing a professional. They've seen a situation and they don't necessarily agree, or they don't find it ethical, a situation that's happened with children. They felt very vulnerable in saying in the reflection, this is not how I would have done it. So just some key takeaways before the Q&A. Students develop an awareness of a dual identity while studying, being a professional and a student simultaneously, with some accountability for career plans. There's a strong connection between professional experiences, degree study, and how to present this using digital tools, that idea of ownership. Reflection can be difficult due to perceived vulnerability of presenting reflective learning experiences, and students' digital skills cannot be assumed. They found that the curation of an e-portfolio really difficult. Generationally, digital natives is a really harmful trope, even though employers may lead with this assumption. You're 20 years old, you should be able to do this, and that's been harmful for our students. So exposing students in their degrees to e-portfolios can increase this level. And finally, curriculum and assessment, it needs to embed employability and reflective work to enhance childhood studies programs. That's what we found. So hopefully, any questions? There we go, 15 seconds over. I think I'm all right. Just.
No, that's absolutely fine, Jodie. So we'll let you stop sharing your screen. I'll see again if colleagues have got questions. And as you pointed out, it really nicely fits with the presentation that Tom did as well. And there's a nice bit of scene setting there. So colleagues, any questions for Jodie? Because again, Jodie, I've got plenty I could ask you, but don't want to monopolise. Louise, over to you.
Thank you, Jodie. That was really, really interesting. Probably for me, more than anyone, I'm also an early childhood studies lecturer. So hello, I'm at University of Plymouth, not Portsmouth. So yeah, not too far away. Yeah, I've got a question. I'm really interested in this idea of vulnerability, because I also teach the work-based learning reflective module, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Our students don't share theirs with their employers, so they have full reign to write whatever they like in a professional way. How do you work that out when you know that employers, I know you said in the final year they've sort of changed them a bit for employers, but how does that affect their writing, their ability to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be reflective, when they know in the future employers may look at what they've written?
Yeah, so as part of our conversion into the employers, we can share this with employers. The first thing that we do is we look at it and we say, look, what on here would you not want an employer to see? And a lot of them will either rephrase some things or they'll take that out, because we don't want their vulnerability to mean that it's stemmed like sort of stumps their learning, which we have found. So yeah, we don't, during the process of their e-portfolios and then developing it, and then essentially they're first-handed, even though they can have it afterwards, it's only ever seen by lecturers, only ever seen by their assessors. And then it's after that that we then go through that. And a lot of them choose to take things out or tailor what's in there before they give it to an employer, because that vulnerability is key to learning, we found, and you probably found exactly the same. So we're quite clear on, actually, that's really, really important, you know, especially when, and you probably find this when they're questioning a bit of practice, they're questioning something from someone who's been, you know, who's been a professional for a long time. So yeah, we're quite careful with that. There's also and this always makes people laugh, but there's also those e-portfolios that get handed in that have things that you wouldn't want an employer to see anyway. Like one wonderful student had on her e-portfolio, on her first page, I'm student X, I'm a child in new studies with psychology student, and I'm a Gemini. So when there's a full moon, I'm really creative. And it's like, look, there's certain things that you might not want to share with employers. So we do have that conversation, but yeah, their reflections, we make sure that vulnerability is protected before they share with employers, definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Louise. And I know that Sarah's posted in the chat that she's found this very helpful, because are similarly doing summative assessments, as do I. And that whole thing about the professional you versus the personal you, what you share, where those boundaries are conversations that are very alive for my own students just now, because they've just submitted an e-portfolio assessment, which I've been marking. So I had a question in terms of, obviously, you know, you said about them then curating content about what then maybe goes into a public domain versus obviously what they preserve for assessment purposes. But you seem to say that you used Google as the kind of platform. I use PebblePad for that reason. It's a tool that's in our domain, and again, likewise, they can select, and it enables me to mark more readily. So I just wondered, in terms of the practicality of marking, where you situate that again against what might then in the future go out into something that they would share publicly.
This has always been actually quite an area for contention when we present it across the university, because our sort of Department for Quality and Enhancement said that we should be using a programme that we've sort of paid for, that is in the university. But of course, what that does is it stops students being able to do anything else with it. It's really internal. And so what happens with Google Sites is we're able to embed documents in Google Docs. And in those Google Docs, then you can see when students have edited. So, of course, when the deadline's passed and we're in the 4-week marking period, and then we have the exam boards, we say to students, look, they have to share their work with us as the assessors. You aren't allowed to edit it past this date, and then you can have it again in year 3. So we assess it essentially as a collection of Word documents, but embedded in a Google site. So that's what we do, because we can leave comments, and we mark using a standard rubric, but we do also mark it fairly holistically. So, you know, how it looks and how much effort the students put into it. But the actual academic work is just like it would be on Turnitin. And we've got sort of Google extension plagiarism checkers as well on it. So that sort of, it swallows up some of the institutional barriers that we find with a very creative assessment, which is good. But, you know, that said, we talk about students being digital natives. I've led this completely, and of course then I have to coach and train my colleagues in order to be able to teach it, and then in order to be able to mark it. And of course my main concern is, if I was to leave the university, it's the know-how to develop and move things on. It's very limited in a lot of teaching teams, is this idea of making a website and then being able to share it and stuff. So it's definitely not without its challenges, e-portfolio's, but that's only in the way that we do them. There are so many different ways. There's another program at the moment that we've been asked to trial called Wiseflow, which puts everything together, which is great, but the license runs out when the student loses their account when they leave. So all that work that they've done and made beautiful, and they've curated it, and it's a QR code, it's not anymore, which for me completely defeats the object of why we've got them to do this sort of lifelong learning project of being a reflective practitioner. So it's a bit of a watch this space where this is going to go, you know.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I use PebblePad for that reason, because it is transportable afterwards for the reasons you've just outlined there. I don't want to hog the questions, so I'll open up to other colleagues as to whether they've got questions for you too, Jodie.
About 3 minutes.
Yeah, we've got
Yeah.
time for at least another question. Jodie, in that case, I just wondered, you touched on it briefly in talking about impact, but in terms of obviously the students you have been working with, you know, and them now moving on into graduate employment, have they said anything to you there about, you know, what they then been able to do?
So yeah, so the students that we have, I think, and my sample's not huge. I'll go back just to quickly see exactly how many there were. So there were 4 graduates. So of those 4 graduates, we had 1 in teacher training. We had 1 who was working for an LGBTQ youth charity as a trans representative. We had 1 running a maths social enterprise. And then the 4th one we had was, funny enough, had gone to join the Navy after doing a camp in America, was joining the Navy. So all of them were in roles, but that's not necessarily representative of all our charter students. You know, that's 4 students who were very responsive to, would anybody like to talk about this? So they were the ones who did that. So not all of them, especially the one who was joining the Navy, is going to go into work in childhood. But I'd like to think that the reflective work in the process did something for that student. But, you know, maybe that's just a bit romantic. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, see, Sarah's posted a question here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do. So we spend essentially their first teaching block, so September up until Christmas, we have 3 hours a week with the students on their professional practice module, and they do 6 hours a week in their placements. So we do spend a lot of time looking at reflective frameworks, but very critically. So we'll have sort of 3 or 4 weeks looking at lots of different reflective frameworks, framing their professional standards, and then the students can choose. I mean, Gibbs's reflective cycle is massively popular because it's very applicable across all of the different sort of subject disciplines that we see. But I've seen all sorts of reflective frameworks being used. There's Roll from Cottrell. So we try and get them to look at them very critically. And funny enough, last year, a student who did very well, she said, I feel like some of the reflective frameworks that I've looked at aren't showing enough of the interrelation between some of my experiences. So she adapted 2 and created a hybrid reflective framework for herself. And it was that sort of initiative that we thought, right, brilliant, this is working. This critical perspective on reflective frameworks is working. And that was really refreshing to see on her reflective page. It wasn't, I'm following this. It was that didn't work and that didn't work, but together they could. So that was a good thing to see.
Thank you.
Love to see more of that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jodie, for that. And so it turns to me to introduce our last speaker, and apologies, Gonzaga, if I say your name wrong. But I'm going to hand over to you for our last presentation, and I'll give you a 3-minute warning, as I've done with my other colleagues this afternoon. So over to you if you want to share your screen.
Yes. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, it's not currently in presenter mode, but we are seeing your screen.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Gonzaga Isirabahenda. I'm originally from Rwanda, but I'm currently based in Romania. I'm about to finish my PhD. I'm interested in transition from university to the labor market, especially among young university graduates. So the subject that I want to share with you today, it is one of the article I'm working on relating to the career of unemployed young graduate in Romania working in outsourcing company, which they are working as a customer support representative. If you want, you can just call them call center agent. So the subject, the title is we deserve a fair treatment, hepatitis career transition within outsourcing company. So briefly, I will start by introducing what is happening, research methodology, and findings and discussion. Then I will be concluding and provide the way forward. So as a mega trends, Romania, for your information, maybe it's one of Eastern European country which now has long-term trend toward a service economy. If I compare the year of 2000 and now, the employment in service has doubled. Also, due to outsourcing company, the global service sector and working process are being changed. Arrival of numerous outsourcing company in Romania has radically increased the number of service job opportunity. So why outsourcing companies are coming in Romania? It is because Romania is key player in the outsourcing scene. Currently is ranking third globally, and when considering country business environment, economic attractiveness, and the quality of the workforce skills aspect. So as I have mentioned, Romania now is a home to many outsourcing company, but the Romanian labor market is complex and volatile to many young university graduates because there is expansion and normalization of precarious employment conditions. So apart from that, there is a skyrocketing number of graduates employed for position under their education and skills level, and the university work transition are uncertain. So my research aim to analyze graduate employability and explain specifically the return to office within outsourcing company. Due to COVID pandemic or employees were starting working from home. But recently, as I will be mentioning, I will be sharing how the process of bringing back employee to the office was happening, and what prompted us sales company to return to the office, how young university graduates working as a customer support representative or frontline workers experience this return to the office, and how customer support position are impacting their career prospect. So as a methodology, this is based on qualitative design and with a reflective thematic analysis. I use also a critical realism approach to analyze this ongoing study, which is part of my PhD study. So this is based on 3 years of ethnographical case study in which I undertook as I went to work as a customer support representative, and I used participant observation, semi and unstructured interview to capture every the lived work experience. And the data I'm analyzing data using NVivo 12 software. As I mentioned before, this is based in Romania, specifically in Cluj-Napoca. Cluj-Napoca is the second biggest city in Romania. So demographic data of research participant, I did have 28 customer support representative young people aged between 18 to 35. 16 were female, 12 were male. And I interviewed also 4 team leads alongside 2 managers working in outsourced company. As field of study, most of participants were from humanities and social sciences, and other were field of study were professional and applied and formal sciences. So as key findings, I will go direct to the point. I will be the main categories that I found out the steps and the reason behind the return to the office, which will have impact, which had impact to the career of customer support representative. So then I will be discussing their experiences of return to the office, and I will be trying to share how customer support representative position or entry-level position are impacting career of young university graduate. So as a step and the reason behind the return to the office, the case study, the company I started, it's an outsourced, as I mentioned, it's an outsourced company. It's an American company which has different branch in Romania, in Manila, in Costa Rica, in India. They have different departments all over the world. So on 4th August 2022, there is a global intent to get all employees back to the office. If we go back to August 2022, the COVID was still ongoing. But in the US, they started thinking about coming back to the office. So when they introduced this, this initiative was implemented in America, Middle East, and Asia, and Turkey. So they started thinking about if our site are being returned or employer are being back at the office, what will be happening in Europe and Middle East and Asia. So the Romanian site management decided, provided a 30 days notice, which will intend to bring our employees to come back to the office. So I try to, this is based on field study that I was capturing everything, meeting that I was attending, I was capturing how everything goes. So on 10th of January, Romania local management started announcing that we need to come back to the office. So when the COVID was, when we were working at home, it was full-time basics. Every employee was supposed to be working from home. But starting in January, they tried to bring employees to come back to the office, which you were allowed only 1 day a week to work from office and 4 days at home. So 11th of January, they organized a meeting for every employee in which they shared with all the Romanian employees that they plan to return to the office. And the kickoff was 9 of February. Then they provide 8 weeks temporary expectation for people who need more time to be able to come in the office. So 14th of February, all employees were supposed to be at the office. And 14th of April, the last one was supposed to come to the office. The different date means something, because I will be mentioning why. Yes, what I can mention here, there are some quotes from high managerial, people in managerial position, as Sergio, it's an American CFO, who mentioned that we are trying to bring, they are trying to bring employees at the office so that they can work more, have to increase performance and everything. So after what happened when they bring people to the office? So Cluj-Napoca, as I mentioned, it's an expensive city. So people were starting working from home, which it was for some people where it was easy because they are living in a rural area. Coming back to the office, it will require them to look for rent. The one who have children were supposed to be changing the school of their children, and the period of only 1 to 3 months, it was not enough to get an apartment, to get everything. So the time to the office transition was an emotionally fraught process that was involving confusion, insecurity, struggle, and loss. Why? Because employee didn't participate in decision in decision when it comes on returning to the office. So the return to the office also was characterized by coping with various personal situations. As I mentioned, the relocation was was so difficult to many young university graduates in an expensive city. Some of who have children, they were supposed to be changing the school for their children. Also, when employee comes to the office, I saw that I found out that there is an inequality in working condition where the group of people I was studying were placed in co-working space, but this also means something. Also, apart from that, after February, when many people were coming at the office in March, the company announced the termination of contract for many of entry-level employees because the company decided to outsource the department of customer support in Manila, Asia. So as a strategy not to let young university graduate customer support representative to feel angry, they established a strategy to say, we are going to redeploy, we are going to there is a career mobility within other department. So for the one who don't want to be redeployed, he will just have to have his contract terminated. So, and the quotes that I have here are showing the reaction of different customer support representative. Especially, I will start with Anna, who said, despite the nice workplace, he was doubting the volume of data was stressful. The management never adequately notified our hardship, and our effort were under-acknowledged. This is the fact with this company. To be honest with you, we deserve the fair treatment. So another one, Marius, mentioned that he learned a lot from an entry-level opportunity. That multinational company, he learned that multinational company are only targeting profit at all costs. And he understands how hard it was to work in the real world. He recently discovered that his dream will not come true if he kept pushing. He was even starting thinking to undertake coding course for his future career to avoid being a Rosa. Because the city that we are living in now belong to IT professional. It is because if you are working in IT domain, the chance of getting get a good pay is higher. So what customer support roles or position, how customer support role or position how are impacting career prospect? So people who hold customer support role are feeling frustration and dissatisfaction because when you are in job that does not match your potential, there is the decline in motivation. So there is also job instability and high turnover due to the lack of career path and limited personal and professional development. Here, I will be mentioning that when I started ethnographical research within this group of young Romanian graduates, in the year 2000, we had a team of 40 people. Then after 1 year, we remained at 17. Until now, the team that started, I just left the company where we were only 3 people who left, who just still working in that outsourcing company. Also, working in as a customer support representative require high emotional labor, which was impacting the well-being of numerous customer support representative. So, short discussion, I will say that there is a mismatch between the aspiration of university graduate and the labor market realities. Also, there is a myth of decent career within multinational company. Many jobs are disguised as decent employment and now are dominating the Romanian labor service sector. Frontline workers within outsourcing company experiencing the skilling, raw work dignity, limited bargaining power, and talent mismanagement. Lack of this education job matching strategy as outsources company are passionately put customer first. They are never mind about employees. So
Gonzaga, sorry, I just wanted to give you your 3-minute warning. Apologies for interrupting.
Yes, I'm almost at the end. Yes, customer support representative also were not sure what they wanted to do next. And they were keen to explore a range of possibility. Among of them, when the contract was terminated, they just were seeking volunteering roles, freelancer consulting. Other went for other customer support roles, and some just took time to think about their career. So, as concluding remarks, entry-level positions such as customer support representative post has had a significant effect on the job stability, satisfaction, and career progression. Mismatched position in most cases are used as a coping mechanism to avoid unemployment, which also eventually grow precarious career. As a way forward, I will just mention that we are keeping pushing Romanian policymakers to rethink and develop education job matching and talent management approaches in which young university graduates can access high quality and security employment. Also, this study acknowledged the need of employee trade unions that can enhance employee involvement in decisions that affect their work. Yeah, thank you. I would welcome your comment and suggestion.
Thank you very much. And you can stop sharing your screen. And as per previously, I'll ask colleagues in the room if they've got questions first for you based on your presentation. And then I know I certainly have got some that I'll come in with. So colleagues, any questions first of all? So Gonzaga, I'll start off then. So in terms of obviously the impact of the research, I mean, it was quite, not your fault, but it was quite depressing to sort of see just, obviously you had these graduates going out, sort of, going into the workplace and expecting, a particular sort of kind of working environment, and obviously that quite radically changed. So in terms of interactions with the employer, have you had an opportunity to kind of, where are you in terms of involving them and feeding and disseminating any findings maybe to them at all?
If I understand you correctly, you are asking if I had a chance to share the findings with a young graduate and
with employers more so that they
yes.
have an understanding of their impact essentially on these graduates.
Actually, what I found out is there is how I can just call it management of multinational company. They know what they are doing because they are just targeting profit. Wherever I am assuming they just outsourcing the customer support representative because maybe Romania is in the process of entering a Schengen area, which soon the cost of let's say in customer support representative is being paid 500 euros, and this is the truth. The pay in Romania is still lower. When they will be entering the Schengen area, I am assuming the price, the cost of the payment will be higher. So I had a chance to talk to people who are in Manila, see what they are thinking. In Manila, the minimum salary in Romania is 500 euros. In Manila is 200 euros. So for management of multinational company, they are targeting where there is a cheap labor. So for Romanian local managers, wherever you are talking, you are trying to share with this, they say it's better to have this kind of job instead of being unemployed. So they are aware of what is happening. And sometimes they are trying to say, oh, don't ever talk about customer support representative. We do have some other people who are suffering. Go for them. Go and do the research on people who are working as food delivering, those kind of new types of jobs. So now they are thinking customer support representative is a noble. It's a good position comparing to other precarious job available. They are almost aware of everything happening. But what I can also mention is people in the managerial position, they are being paid very well. So they prefer to not talk at all. And the one who are in entry-level position, they are the one who are suffering.
And from a higher education point of view, Gonzaga, because obviously the other two colleagues have sort of presented on things that we might be doing in the curriculum, is there anything that you think that we could be doing as universities to better prepare sort of students as they graduate for that kind of precarious employment? And then Rosa, I'll come to you after that. Yeah. So, is there anything you think higher education ought to be doing in this situation? I recognise it's the graduate labour market in Romania may be challenging.
Yes, I always challenging people in high education, because whatever they are trying to do, it's the reality on the labor market is totally different. So universities are required to prepare people to the job which are not yet available. The strategy multinational companies are using is totally different. You only I do have other research I did for skills required in these types of jobs. Those that are only skills that anyone I have found that young graduates who are working there, they are overeducated. Why? Because the hard skills they have and the credential they have, the knowledge they have, it's not being used as it is supposed to be. So if I can recommend, I cannot make a mistake to recommend higher education, just teaching people how to communicate, teaching people the soft skills, which every time they are changing. The only thing I see in the period of 4 years working as customer support representative, they are only teaching people there are new application coming, please look how you supposed to be doing, I don't see how universities are going to teach people how to be emotionally stronger when you have customer. Think about whatever you are calling a call center. Maybe you spend a half hour waiting an agent to reply to you. A customer already is upset. That thing will start telling you, hey, he will start harassing you. So how universities are going to prepare people to endure such kind of condition? It's hard. And there is we will be seeing even in 5 years the mismatch in what universities are providing in the labor market, because the labor market is requiring something that university cannot provide.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Ross, over to you.
Thanks, Andrea. And thank you so much, Gonzaga, for your wonderful presentation. Great job on trying to use critical realism to try to understand employability. And I really think that you did explanatory, you got a really good explanatory data, which is what critical realism try to get. But of course, one thing that I am really, because I'm also using critical realism for my research in employability, what my question would be, what were the mechanisms, the generative mechanisms that you felt were pretty clear? I know I got the explanatory aspect of your data, and it's really good because you can show what's the mismatch is out there between the data, the quantitative data out there, and the actual reality that happened in the field about like how people are prepared and what the challenges are when the explanatory data are ignored or not really paid attention to. But from your perspective and in your research, what are the kind of generative mechanisms for why you call this precarious or a pathetic career transition? That was sort of something that surprised me because you chose it as a title. But is it related to some of the mechanisms that you found, or how did you decide that it is a pathetic career transition overall? Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, as a generative mechanism, I have been interested in knowing what is behind why multinational companies are outsourcing their jobs. So the main generative mechanism will be the profit. They need profit at any cost. So that's one. Wherever we are seeing a multinational company, for some Romanian, they are saying, this is an opportunity. We are going to get a good job, decent job. But because they need profit, don't expect they will be working on your talent management. Don't expect that there will be career mobility will be easy. Don't expect that, yes, they really need a few people. We need to know what types of job they are outsourcing. They are most of the job that they are outsourcing, we will be finding, let's say, professional job, they have like, let's say 50, but for customer support, 200. Those types of job they are outsourcing. So to reach as a effect to have uncertain career or precarious career, something happened. The strategy they are using to there are some in a real world, what we can just call there are some mechanism, some structure in actual, let's say this strategy of return to the office, they used this strategy to terminate the contract of young university graduate, in which we missed. I missed. Maybe it's because I'm a foreigner in Romania, but I didn't see company coming together and bring all employees together and tell them, hey, look, the law says this, and they try to take one by one. For you, we'll be giving you, let's say, if we finish your contract, we will give you 3 months salary. Another one, 4 months, another one. There is not something that bring employee together. Why this happened? Because there is management, as I mentioned, management from high managerial people in high managerial position in the US and in Romania. They are somehow they are working together and put young university graduate. If they just give you 2 months and you don't know what is happening, that's all. And the city that, as I have mentioned, the city that I'm living, it's a city of students. It's a city where there are many IT companies, which is very expensive. The time when people start coming at the office, they start checking how they can just get a rent, which is very expensive. After getting a rent for 3 months, and they say, your contract has already terminated. So do you think how it feels? So other generative mechanisms, apart from profit, I have found that education job mismatch. being over-educated also can have impact on your uncertain career. It's a hard.
Sorry, I'm going to have to pull things together. So apologies. But if you just want to finish what you were saying there, it's just I'm conscious people have got to get to other rooms. So apologies for interrupting, because it has been fascinating. But if you could just finish the point you were saying there, and then we'll conclude today's session. Sorry, Gonzaga, did you want to finish? I sort of felt bad interrupting, but I'm just conscious we're over time.
Last one. For young university graduate, as a generative mechanism, being underemployed or overeducated, because I checked skills required for doing the job and the skills are using it. They are 100% overeducated. So being in such position, it is something not everyone can just see with the eyes, but it's generative mechanism which lead them to uncertain career. If you are expecting, oh, maybe they will be seeing my talent, they will be maybe allocating another position, and you see nothing, you will start like feeling, you start questioning the value of university education. Why you spend 4 years or 2 years or 7 years at the university, ending up working as a customer support agent. Yeah, thank you.
And sorry to finish on that kind of slightly depressing note, but I think it's important that you sensitize people to the fact that it's not all a bed of roses necessarily, and that there are some challenges out there for our graduates to navigate. So thank you for reminding us of that as well. It's been really interesting, and I feel very privileged to have chaired this session today, because I found all the talks, really stimulating. So thank you for all our contributors, and thank you to the audience as well. But I'll sign off now and allow people to get to their next parallel session. So thank you very much, everyone, and bye for now. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.